And we're
live.
Welcome
to the Red Couch Theology podcast, where I changed the preset on our camera so I don't have to stand up and fix it.
Brilliant. Welcome to the Red Couch Theology podcast, where a minute ago neither of us were in the room.
Yeah. Whew. We have lots to talk about, Alex.
We do.
Brilliant.
We do. That's great.
Yeah, because we actually had a great question come in from the sermon, and it might have been meant for the previous week. I can't recall. I think sometimes there's been a couple weeks where a question's been submitted like right before the show, and I don't see it until after the show.
Yeah.
And we have some questions from Alpha class.
Oh, man.
We had Alpha kickoff last night. It was a great time. We had 45 people.
Wow.
Sign up for this class. A couple people couldn't make it this week for various reasons.
Including my wife.
Including your wife.
Birthday party for a teenager. You know, that's an interesting,
important thing.
Right? Well, 14's, I think, an age where you don't want your mother not to turn up to your birthday party. But
yeah, I don't know, maybe. Yeah, so lots of ground to cover. So here's a couple of things. I'll give an overview up top so you all can sort of start to see where we're going to go.
And I can do some planning as well in the...
Alex, on one of the Sundays, here's the question from the sermon, and then the rest will be on Alpha stuff.
Yeah.
In the passage John 8, so that's a while back, but then Alex talked about Jesus speaking the words about freedom in John 8 and then obtaining life and life to the full. Alex said real life in his sermon. So the question is around, what does that even look like?
Brilliant.
Is there any scripture that gives us what life is, what's the good life? What is this fullness of life look like other than the promise of some eternal thing? Is there any actual promise? So let's not answer it quite yet, but that's one of the questions. And maybe there's a little bit of a, let me read the end of the question because it's so well put. Or we have a hope in Christ and can rest in that, but what other scripture helps us lay out what that life in Christ beyond salvation is? So great question. Then from Alpha, we had sort of an introductory session. Yep. We talked about like, if there is a God, what would we want to ask him? And some of the questions that came out were things like this. Why does God make it so difficult to like see evidence of him in the world?
Yeah.
In the video, they talked about, there's a lot of evidence that Christ was historical. They didn't give that evidence in this week. Spoiler alert, this coming Alpha will give a little bit more evidence of Jesus. But I think one of the questions is like, okay, great. Telling me that's one thing, but can you give us some of the historical evidence for the historical Jesus and maybe the resurrection? Then we have, evidence that Jesus existed as a historical figure, and that he claimed to be God, a little bit of evidence for the resurrection. And then this one actually came up a lot. When there was I think that one of the questions that came up around the tables, at least around some of the tables, was, do you think there's more to this? And that somehow spurred into, I actually think there's maybe lots of different paths to God. And is that true? And why does Christianity have such an exclusive claim on, can't there be multiple paths? So there you go. We're going to go on this episode.
Man, we are going.
Yeah, we're going deep.
Where are we starting?
I know. This is the introductory session.
Yeah.
I think we start with the John 8 because that was a couple weeks ago.
Okay. Yeah. And
then we go into the big, hairy topic of all these other questions.
Yeah.
And I think that was only a fracture. Like we had, as if we're going to run out of time or things to talk about with those few questions. But one of the questions we asked last night in Alpha was, if it turns out there is a God, what would you want to ask?
Yeah.
And some of the things that popped up around my table was like, am I doing this right? Are we good, God? Or things like, why can't there be multiple paths to God? Things like this. So fascinating, great questions. Let's dive in. So rewind to the sermon. I know this is going to feel a little bit of herky-jerky, but hey, this is what we signed up for during Alpha, so you guys are going to deal with it. We're catering to multiple audiences now. All right. It's not too late to sign up for Alpha, by the way. If you want to sort of track with us, it's a great place to invite friends. Oh, yeah. We had such great conversations. We had people who've been in the church for 30 years and people who literally are just exploring for the very first time in the class. And right up front, I said, let's just assume none of us believe. No. And so we had great questions of like, I asked some of my scariest questions about the scriptures and like, anyway.
No,
what
did you do to these poor people?
I know, I ruined them. Sign up. In John 8, it talks about this fullness of life, abundant life.
Well, John 10, it talks about that, right?
Yes, but so let me back up
I'm trying to think of
why
a
they
passage
reference John 8.
John
Freedom.
8. Yeah, okay,
So freedom in John 8 and then life in John 10. And so what is that? Is that actually a promise for anything inside of this life? Or is it a promise only for some future disembodied in the clouds playing harps?
Yeah. So I think it.
By the way, that's a joke. That's not what the future is. So,
but some of it maybe. No.
I mean, it depends on how much you like harps, I guess.
I'm a big fan.
Really?
Yeah. Just
closet harp like aficionado.
A harpist. Yeah.
I've seen you play cello, so I'm doubtful.
So I think one of the struggles we have with this idea of freedom, and whether Christianity or following Jesus, let's use that term, includes real freedom, is I think that we have this suspicion of what freedom really is. So, like, I think we have this suspicion that, like, loosely defines freedom as I get to do whatever I want.
Yeah.
Now, the problem with that is actually we just know psychologically that actually often leads to imprisonment, not freedom. So I'm free in terms of, like, just if I'm free to do whatever I want. I'm free to do hard drugs. I'm free to take heroin.
Yeah.
Just statistically, I know that a few times, arbitrary number of times of taking heroin, I'm no longer free to not take heroin. Yeah. Like something about the way that my physiology works means that now I actually have to continually chase that thing.
You sound like you're speaking from experience or something here now.
No. Well, I am, because we also know now that certain things are as addictive
as heroin, yeah.
As heroin. Or let's use the term crack, which is generally considered to be the most addictive from what I've heard in terms of substances. So someone did a study like not long ago where they said the ding of getting messages and emails had similar addictive properties to the taking of hard drugs. There's a feeling we get where something like comes up.
Someone knows I exist.
Someone wants us. Like, now that might be a spam email, but the ding is still just as good. Yeah. Until we find out that it wasn't actually offering anything real at all. So like, if our definition of freedom is do whatever you want without any consequences.
Yeah.
Well, that's just not a reality for anybody.
Yeah. And we had a whole sermon series kind of about that. The Anchored sermon series last summer was like, maximum freedom, do whatever I want is not freedom. Yeah.
So firstly, like a good premise to go into this is when Jesus talks about real freedom, he's not talking about that working definition that seems to be true for most of modern America. That do whatever you want. Like, it's my body, my choices. Like, well, no, actually, every single choice you make affects you to a degree,
and other people
to a degree. So like, there's actually this. I don't know if you've seen it. There's this popular thing where people interviewers will go around to people and be like, what's your body count?
Yeah.
You know, and it's talking about sex. But in actual fact, like it even in the language nudges to the fact that no, there's a cost to that as well.
Yeah.
So like even like because body count traditionally comes from death, like how many people have you killed? And so there's even that, it's like nudging towards like, oh no, there's some kind of cost there that's under the surface that's unspoken. So when Jesus is talking about freedom, he's clearly talking about that, not that kind of freedom. So it seems in Jesus' mind that for people, maybe across time, there's been this picture of freedom and this picture of life. That's connected to, I do what I want. That was actually my brother's joke phrase when we were kids, like when we were all in our teens, like, you know, my mom would say, you're not allowed to do that. He'd be like, I do what I want. I do what I want.
How'd that go for him?
It didn't go great. So Jesus is...
And he found out very quickly that is incorrect.
Jesus is suggesting there is a way to live that is a truer freedom than our picture of freedom and a truer life than our picture of life. Now, the question is that simply an eternal thing? Like a payoff thing of like, don't do what you want now and you'll get to experience real life, which is actually in certain groups of Islam an Islamic idea. Like martyrs go to an eternity where they're, you know, presented with, is it 40 virgins or something like that? It's like, don't do these things now because you're going to get to do them on an eternal level later.
Yeah.
So really, I think his question could be some down to, is that what Jesus is talking about by freedom? Some afterlife payoff?
Yeah, and I think sometimes the question also feels a little bit like, I don't know, you know, if this is a follower of Jesus who's been walking with Jesus for a while, sometimes it's like, is this it? I signed up for where are the benefits of this faith tradition?
Sure, yeah.
Because I'm experiencing pretty much the exact same life experience as someone who doesn't believe.
Yes.
And so I'm clinging to maybe there's some sort of payoff at the end of life. Or when we have shuffled off this mortal coil, as Shakespeare would say, you know. I
love that you just quoted Shakespeare. Thank you so much. That makes me feel so welcomed in this country.
Yeah. So, that's all I got. Sorry for Shakespeare. So, but is there a promise in this world? And are there benefits in this world?
And so that.
And what are they?
I think that depends. So I think actually my feeling would be that the Christian life has given me almost every good thing I experience in life.
Okay.
Like my relationship with my wife is premised on our joint Christian faith that has led to certain assumptions about how we live life together. Yeah. That there's a certainty and faithfulness that, you know, she actually doesn't need to worry about me having an affair because she will always look like she did when we met when we were 19.
Yeah.
She doesn't need to have to worry about me having an affair because I am the most faithful person in the world or because I will never meet anyone that might compare to her in every attribute.
Yeah.
She doesn't have to worry about that because
you have a deep
combined Christian faith means that it's not just the two of us, but God.
And my wife doesn't have to worry for those reasons, and because just look at me, like,
oh, come on.
So
that sense of like there is a beauty to that actually gets missed.
Yeah.
Like we actually believe, I think, as a church that when Jesus lays out how to live, he actually does it because he's like, this is the best way for a human being to live.
Yeah, and I think that starts to get at what this question may be saying. Like, 'cause actually, they ask, are there scriptures that tell us what that life looks like?
Yeah.
And I think a great go-to would be the Sermon on the Mount.
Sure, yeah.
The Sermon on the Mount is sort of Jesus's magnum opus of what it means to be human, painting pictures of that experience. And I wish I could tell you that there's passages where if you do X, you will always get Y.
Yeah.
And that's not how the equation of life works, even in the Christian tradition. But similar, like the book of Proverbs, for example, is like all these wisdom sayings, right? These are things that are generally true.
Yeah.
And the same thing has to do with a lot of the teachings of Jesus, even in the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah.
Like, if you're really, really mean to people, you don't have great relationships.
Yeah.
Shocker! This just in.
Yeah.
Be nice, and you have better relationships, and therefore you have more life.
Yeah.
That's the kind of things the Scripture does all over the place. Probably most clearly in the Sermon on the Mount.
So I think Jesus has this like unspoken confidence of living this way is the thing that works best for your physiology, how you're made, your spiritual life, all of those different things combined. Don't live this way because you impress God with your performance, but live this way because it's how you were designed at your core. So the mantra of like freedom and life from the modern world says, well, actually, you just chase whatever pleasure is most available
Palpable.
to you. Yeah. Now, unfortunately, like psychologically, we also know that most of those pleasures disappear really quickly.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, even if you aren't a follower of Jesus, you know that's not true.
Totally.
Like, I want to be really strong and look good.
Yeah.
Then you can't eat cake every day.
Sure. Yeah,
we know that there's a like caving to every whim of your bodily urges is not a recipe for an awesome life.
Did you read this story recently about Bill and Miranda Gates? Like they got divorced like a couple of years ago after like from this premise of like, you were in our 60s, we might live another 30 years and our relationship just isn't functioning where we want it to. And so we're going to go and we're going to break up because we want to find someone else to spend another 30 years.
Got a couple more years. Let's try this. Try it.
But not really, not a couple more years. No, from a premise of like, we don't just have a couple of years. We expect to live much longer than like, so we're now no longer retiring, with 6 months a year to live, which was a common view of retirement back 200 years ago, 150 years ago. You eke it out, and then you just kind of finally you're given this brief retirement before you die. But like we expect to be rich and healthy for another 30 years. And so our relationship is not one that we feel like we want to live for another 30 years. We're going to have maximal freedom in the next 30 years. And so we want to find someone we want to spend 30 years with.
Yeah.
And so they broke up. And then someone asked Bill Gates about it not long ago. Like, was it a good thing? And he's like, my honest answer is I really miss Miranda way more than I expected to. And what I miss most is I miss the person I built a life with. So I have kids I'm still in a relationship with, and I miss the one person who was there when they were born with me.
Yeah.
Who like knew them from that earliest age, that knew their common stories.
Yeah.
That was part of that with us. And he actually says, whether it's unspoken or not, I can't remember, but like this idea of like, I think I gave that up too lightly. Yeah. I think I underrated the gift of a life with a person.
Yeah, and I think that one of the big barriers to Christianity for a lot of people is actually hidden in this question.
Sure.
Because I think most people who encounter the Christian tradition and the teachings of Christianity think these are the rules I have to follow. The Bible gives us rules that I have to follow so God won't be angry at me and I won't get zapped.
Yeah.
No. Actually, these are a good God offering humanity the best way of being human, and then coming to earth to deal with all of our shortcomings when we fail to live up to our own best standards.
Yeah.
And that's a way more invitational space to live in. And then you start to get to experiment. Okay, I'm going to try out the teachings of Jesus. Treat Jesus, maybe if you're not a person of faith, maybe you could treat Jesus as like the best guru on being a human. And start there. And then experiment with the teachings of Jesus and like, is he right about being human?
Which is what the early church did about 100 AD. It wasn't early, right at the beginning, but about 100 AD, they start taking this posture of, you probably don't want to live the teachings of Jesus. They said, so like when you take a year and live them out, and then come back to us. And if you've said yes to the teachings of Jesus, we'll baptize you. On the surface, they look like the teachings of Jesus are demanding. And yet, when you start living in those guardrails, you start to find, oh no, this is maybe how I'm supposed to live. And what you very rarely hear, and I'm going to kind of put this alongside another scenario, you very rarely hear someone say, man, like, whew, I wish I wasn't a Christian last night. I wish I wasn't following Jesus last night. Like it just you don't hear that language.
Yeah.
Whereas the number
man, I wish I hadn't slept well so that I can get up and be kind to my family.
Yeah. Yeah. Whereas the number of conversations you have with people of like, oh, the pleasure scenario felt pretty good last night for about the first like half the night when my inhibitions kind of disappeared. I was maybe flirting with some people. I was maybe, kind of planning what the rest of the night would look like. But this morning, there's a whole ton of messy kind of like sense of like, well, what did that relationship mean? There's a whole sense of the walk of shame language, all those types of things. Like it's never quite as good as it's positioned. Like I actually think this, like maybe I'd say it this way. I think like the world has better marketing than the church. Like the life of pleasure has a better marketing system where it says, oh, this is what it's going to look like all the time. And then you realize like, oh no, it doesn't. There's this really interesting interesting scene in the TV show Succession. And there's two guys in their like late 40s, early 50s. And the one of them is still trying to figure out his marriage.
Yeah.
And then the other one is kind of like he's split up from his wife and he's just dating every 30-year-old, 25-year-old that comes his way. And the one guy kind of says like, I kind of envy you a little bit. And the other guy's like, dude, I envy you. Because like he says, all of these girls, like, fine, like there's a certain pleasure to what I'm doing, but none of them are a patch on the type of women we married. Like they just don't compare in terms of their character, their brilliance, their intellect, all of those different things. He said, like I've sold out for something that just can't last.
Yeah.
Because soon I'm going to be 60 and then I'm going to be 70 and all of this is going to be gone. He says, what I'm doing right now is I'm living as best as I can for the moment because I know that the long game is awful. And that seems to be the reality that Jesus is very comfortable with. Like, this is a life that can be well lived. Now, what we haven't even got to yet is the relational piece of like Jesus presents this idea that actually being able to have a continual conversational relationship with the God of the universe is the single best gift. And that's why across history, you read stories of guys that have been thrown in prison for their faith for 20 years. Who were like, wouldn't change it for the world. Yeah. Sure, was it a horrible existence? But what I got from it, the gift of who God was to me in that season, nothing like it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the deepest abiding satisfaction of my own Christian life is that Jesus has been there through all of it and promises to abide. Like, and so much so that in the deepest, darkest seasons of my life, I've done this we've joked about it a little bit on the show. I've done this imaginative exercise of like, if every bad thing I could come up with could possibly happen to me, I lose my family, I lose my reputation, I lose any monetary value, any capacity to work. Everyone thinks I'm the biggest loser in the world. Yeah. If I had Christ in that, I think I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm okay. Yeah. I could be okay. It would stink and all those sorts of things. But because he's this steady foundation, I have this picture sometimes from time to time in life, and especially like when I sing songs like Firm Foundation or On Christ the Solid Rock I Stand, where I picture an ocean that is just raging. And there's this like this jut of rock sticking out of the ocean.
The waves are just bouncing off. Yeah.
It might be a tiny jut of rock, but I'm perched on top of it, and he is that cornerstone, that rock that I stand upon, and everything else around me rages. Literally everything. Even the best human relationships have moments where it feels like chaos. But he is never once moved.
So there's this story that I drag out every now and again. It's not even my story, but it's so good. I'm unashamedly going to tell this story over and over again throughout my life. And it's one that my Old Testament professor in seminary told me.
Yeah.
In the middle of teaching, I think it was like Samuel or Kings. I think it must be early First Kings. And he's telling the story alongside one of the Psalms that David writes.
Yeah.
When he's been chased by Saul and he's hiding in the cave. He talks about how God is my rock and all those different things. He says, let me tell you a story. So about 20 years ago, found out that my wife was having an affair with one of my best friends. She left me. She took my kids with her. She took the company that we'd run together with her as well. She took everything from me. And he said, so one night in the middle of winter, I stumbled down to a lake near my house. And I was about to throw myself into the lake in the middle of like the ice and the cold and fully clothed. He said, like, I was just looking for a way out. And he said, just as I'm about to do it, God speaks to me like an audible voice stood behind me, like right there. And this voice says to me, if you have nothing else, am I enough for you? And he said, in that moment, like I was torn between this sense of this is what feels like the easy way, and then this is what God is saying to me and offering me. He says in that middle of that, like that edge of that lake, he said, I got down on my knees and said, God, if I have nothing else, you're enough for me. Yeah. He says he's telling this story, having got remarried, found a woman he loves, teaching in a school he loves, a subject he's brilliant at and loves. And now having started a business on the side with his wife that's bringing in extra income, everything has been returned to him. But he said it's in that moment there was nothing. And I'm always just amazed at that story. Yeah. Because what's brilliant about it is that in that moment, God didn't say, well, his prayer life hasn't been that great recently.
Yeah.
I'm actually a little bit disappointed. He's been a bit snarky about the woman that left him. Like, he hasn't really shown the forgiving Christian
what kind of faith is he showing? He's about to kill himself.
Yeah.
Like,
he's
not a person
actually
of faith.
a bit of a disappointment to me. God turns up for him, as he does so often in the midst of suffering, full of grace, and in a life-changing way.
Yeah.
So somewhere like that piece works alongside that fact. The Christian life is just a great life to live. It's a beautiful gift of a life.
Okay.
But it also is the centerpiece of it is that God invites you into a personal relationship with him.
So, all right, I think we should pivot to some of these other questions, but
and we've touched a little bit on them a little bit.
Oh, I think we have. Yeah. We absolutely have. But to pivot to alpha, something we just were talking about with this idea of fullness of life and all this stuff, which actually was the topic for last night in alpha, right? Is this all there is to life kind of thing? Yeah. Something that they said in the alpha episode was that they quoted the C.S. Lewis quote: "If Christianity is real, it's of utmost importance. If it's false, it's of no importance. The one thing it cannot be is moderately important." Yeah. And what a guy.
Who writes like that now?
Just so good, right? So based upon what we've said so far, it could be moderately important. Like, it could be, some great advice. It could be on par with a fitness coach on YouTube. Follow these tips, you'll get more fit. Or a nutritionist. Eat this way, you'll feel a little bit better.
Yeah, I would not agree with that personally.
No, I'm not saying you are.
No,
I'm saying that our audience might be hearing that right now.
Sure.
So tell me how we get from this place of life, like the Christian tradition. We essentially made a case that the Christian tradition is like an invitation to the best way of being
Yeah,
human.
sure.
Great.
Yeah.
Cool. That could be moderately important. I'll take it when I can. And when I'm busy, I may not be able to take that recipe or that prescription.
Yeah.
But I could kind of come in and out of that thing.
Yeah. And
just like I do my workout program.
And I think that like that can feel like that's what we're saying because of the order with which we came into the questions.
Exactly.
Right? So we came in from a sense of supposing there is this eternal invitation to a kingdom that's beyond this world. That's a one-day thing. Is there anything for now?
Yeah.
Like, and if it is just the now, moderately important, you're right. But that's not how it's postured. It's postured as a greater than life question, a beyond this world question, an eternal question.
So how is the teachings of Jesus and the Christian tradition big enough to be of utmost importance now?
Well, is there a difference between the utmost importance now versus utmost importance then? That feels like a pretty arbitrary designation. Then.
Well, I feel like some folks who might be listening would say, "Cool, tips and tricks on being human." That sounds like moderately important. And they may try it out and be like, they may even come to the conclusion, best possible tips and tricks on being human. That still doesn't feel like utmost important kind of stuff.
But again,
or like the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians 15, who says, if this isn't true, we're fools.
Sure.
And we're above all men most to be pitied. So
Yeah.
help us get to the place where this is of utmost importance kind of space.
Well, because he posits it as an eternal thing. That's what I'm saying. I mean, that's what I'm saying, really. Like he says it's not just an earthly thing. So it's only a full life if it's coupled with that eternal element. Yeah. Well, then, and of course, the stories themselves never accept it's a possible. They would say it's a certain.
Yeah. So if I hear you correctly, you're saying the eternal component, for example, the story you just told about your professor, the eternal component makes that quote unquote surrender and statement of, yes, you are enough for me.
Yeah.
The only reason that makes any rational sense is if that decision carries with it the weight of eternity.
Yes, because if it doesn't, then it's just a voice in his head.
Yes.
It's just, and no one's with him. He is alone. And yeah, he has nothing. He truly has nothing.
He's done some sort of psychological truth, but he's deluded.
Yeah. So what the voice has told him is that, is the phrase we've used a couple of times, which is another C.S. Lewis quote, that the man who has Jesus and nothing has as much as the man who has Jesus and everything else. That's how it presents the story, that the thing that you have is so large, it dwarfs every other possible thing that you could possibly have. So actually, the story would insist that while I feel like the Christian life has given me every good thing, had it given me nothing, it would be just as good.
Yeah.
Now, again, hard to see from a certain perspective, but that's what it insists on.
It does. And I think there's one other layer that can maybe get at answering my own question, which is occasionally the teachings of Jesus themselves are crazy demanding.
Sure.
Like obnoxiously so, self-destroyingly so. Let me give you a couple examples. For example, love your enemies.
Sure.
This is contrary to your physiology. It's contrary to your biology.
Absolutely.
It's contrary to someone attacks you, don't attack them back. Instead, find some way from this internal stability of your relationship with God to not only tolerate them, but to love them.
So the
only way you get there is if you believe that that Jesus is absolutely who he says he is.
So I would nudge back a little bit on the idea that it's contrary to your physiology. I mean, I think that there's enough research to say that forgiveness is the absolute best thing for you physically.
Yes.
Like the unforgiveness will actually rip you apart. you're actually playing with a thing that you can't control.
Yeah, but your physiology, I'm talking not psychology.
Okay.
So that's a little bit more of a psychological response, which we can study. That's the hindsight's 2020.
But it also
science.
affects your physiology, is what I'm saying. It also affects who you are.
You're right. We're holistic creatures, but what I mean is, like, in the moment, you have a fight or flight response.
Sure. Yeah.
That the way of Jesus says, that very, very, very natural biological response that I designed in you to protect yourself from danger.
Yeah.
Say no to it now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Jesus does and goes to the cross.
Absolutely.
He says no to his fight or flight response and goes to the cross and dies on behalf of humanity. That's what I mean by the physiological piece of it. And you're right. It pans out. It's actually really healthy, even physiologically.
Yeah. And there's almost no scenario where being in fight and flight permanently is a good thing for you. It almost always destroys you.
Yeah. I mean,
and that's what happens in unforgiveness.
We have an epidemic in our country with stomach issues.
Sure.
And a huge percentage of that epidemic is caused by living in fight or flight response, which your digestion shuts down when you're in fight or flight.
Yeah.
So irritable bowel syndrome, maybe you need to forgive someone.
Ooh, I like it.
Like, I'm not even joking. This is how the teachings of Jesus work.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we've already started to delve into a lot of the topics that Alpha addressed yesterday. But can we offer some more concrete evidence for the existence of the historical Jesus?
So they gave nothing.
They just said there's a ton of evidence.
Yeah.
And I was surprised that there's all this evidence. And I read some of the original things. And this coming week, just so you know, if we can't give you enough right now, we are, I didn't prepare Alex for this. So we're going to draw from our historical studies on some of this stuff. But yeah.
I mean, so the documents are surprisingly numerous, which is unusual for an older tradition, right? So you go back a couple of thousand years. I think if I remember the last time I looked at this, there's about 4 copies of manuscripts that say that Caesar existed. That just as a person, he was a thing. Now, like everyone in school knows that, well, Julius Caesar, right? Founder of the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
Like greatest empire, biggest empire in history in terms of like the known world compared to the empire, like at its height, the only civilized empire in the world. So I think that sense of like assumption that he's around and a person.
Yeah.
If you were to actually look at documentary evidence for it, you might say, oh, wait, hold on, was he even a thing? Now, the documentary evidence for who Jesus was for the New Testament manuscripts are so big, like 28,000, I think, something like that.
I don't know.
And it goes back so early in comparison to when these manuscripts were written. We've got fragments of manuscripts from like the 60s AD. Which is nuts, considering that's when most of the manuscripts start to be formed.
Yeah.
Like, so the fact that we can go back and say, oh, like, this is like traceable history of the early church from the 1st century. Like, end of the 1st century, we got concrete writers that are writing about church history.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just nuts to have almost like bird's eye view people that talk to people that walked with Jesus. And they're writing whole histories of it, taking a wave in the Gospels, which, at least in a couple of instances, would claim to be eyewitness accounts.
So then what about the person who says, okay, all right, yeah, but they're all followers of Jesus. So
sure.
So what about?
But that in itself becomes a problem from the opposite side of the argument, right? Like the idea that someone would risk a made-up story that opposes the message of the Roman Empire just for the fun of it.
So that they get murdered in the Colosseum
or
whatever.
It's just, there's a great little quote from
I'm standing my ground on this fake story. And then they're like, we're busting out lions right now.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm standing my ground anyway. Not likely.
This story is too important. And that's essentially what they're saying. There's a great little quote from, do you remember Chuck Colson?
Yeah.
He was Richard Nixon's henchman in Watergate. And he became a Christian, and he said, like, part of my faith is built on the fact that, like, we cracked within days, Like, we're trying to hold together this made-up story about Watergate, and we're all telling different stories, all giving each other up, all betraying each other within seconds because we just didn't believe it to be true.
Yeah.
And so I think you have to accept that, like, at the very best, at the very worst, the first disciples absolutely believed that they had seen Jesus.
Thousands of Christians died for their faith who had access to original source material.
Sure. Yeah,
in like other humans.
And hundreds of them that actually say, we saw Jesus alive.
Yeah. And they stood their ground even under the threat of death.
So at the very
there's
worst,
not any examples of that kind of thing in other in human history.
No. And so at very worst, you're saying there was a mass event where some illusion convinced them that Jesus was alive to the point where they had no doubts about it, to the point where they could say, like, this means so much. This is the interesting thing, right? It's not that they just believed they'd seen him alive. Like, that sort of thing doesn't mean that you say, well, I'll die for it.
Yes.
You don't die for factual information.
Yes.
You die for a story that says everything that I knew about the world is now different.
Yep.
So whatever they've seen is enough to convince them that Jesus has done something so groundbreaking that nothing that physically happens to them on earth is worth surrendering that story for. If you've just seen someone alive, you're like, well, like, yeah, I saw something happen, but I'll happily buy another 20 years of life by saying it didn't happen. But to actually get to a point of saying, I don't care about what happens to me now. You know, like, one of the groundbreaking things for me is, like, you think about Peter. According to the stories, like, Peter had to watch his wife crucified before he was crucified. Like, you think what it takes to not crack and just say, like, okay, fine, like, whatever, just, like, please, just, like let it go, end of misery, any of those things. I'll say anything so long as, you know, and this story isn't limited to them. This story runs to current date.
Yeah.
Like, it's like 33 AD or 27 AD or whatever you think about the exact historicity to current. It's like still today, there's people, there's one amazing story of a family in China, of missionaries who are going to be executed by some group that are opposed to them. I think it's China, could be another Far Eastern country. And one of the dad, like, denies his faith, and they let him go. And his family are left about to be killed, and they all call to him, begging for him to come back and stand up for his faith and to join them in death.
Jeez.
And so the dad walks back out of the forest that he's been able to walk into when they've let him go, and says, no, I just made that up. I would never deny Jesus. And dies with his family. I mean, like,
crazy.
Like, these are the kind of stories that are still present.
Yeah. So that's one of the really strange evidences in history that we don't find in other historical accounts of people and characters and teachings. The growth of the early church is just a strange, unusual reality in human history.
Yeah.
There's also non-follower of Jesus historical evidence, like Tacitus, Josephus.
Yeah. The Josephus one I always think is a bit weird. Like, I'm like a little bit like, it feels like a bit of an addition. It doesn't fit with how Josephus usually talks. It's not like it doesn't flow super well. But they are like, there's certainly mentions, there's certainly acknowledgements that this was a very significant figure. Like, to stretch it to believe that Josephus actually says, oh, he was the Christ. I'm like, I don't know about that. There's nothing about the rest of his life that suggests he really believes that.
Totally.
But there are, like, almost universal exceptions that Jesus was an incredible moral teacher.
Yes, amongst historians.
Of whom there are no negative stories. Like, the only negative stories that you might perceive to be negative are in the scriptures. Like the conversation with the Syrophoenician woman, or those different things, like those kind of conversation where you're like, that doesn't feel like the Jesus I expect. But even then,
and there's negative stories about the early church.
Sure.
Like they drink blood and stuff, or like their worship practices are kind of wonky.
They're cannibals. They're
cannibals.
Story.
Yeah.
That's
why, there's some weird stuff like that, but not about the person of Christ. So we have Pliny the Younger. We have various different other ancient documents outside of the Christian, what we would call the Bible, the scripture texts that reference the person of Jesus as a historical figure. You already started diving into evidence for the resurrection. Yeah. So a huge evidence that Jesus existed, period, also is evidence of his resurrection. All the things we just talked about, the early growth of the church just doesn't account for, it doesn't make sense without the resurrection.
Yeah.
And there's a ton of other little things that we could turn to. I don't know if there's any more off the top of your head that you can think of.
No, I mean, that covers the broad sense of like across history. I mean, it doesn't even tap into like the miracle stories from today in multiple parts of the church across the world.
Yeah.
Like there's still like the stories of resurrections from the dead, still stories of supernatural healings, some of which I've seen healing for myself, seen it at work. And so I think that there's a surprising amount. Now, it seems that God, as the other question leans to, is never that interested in certainty.
Yeah.
Like, and the actually certainty, we've talked maybe about this, my favorite writer, Frederick Buechner, like gives this, like he posits this idea that what if God just wrote, I am here, God, in stars across the sky.
Yeah.
And like, for like that generation, it would make sense. They'd be like, oh yeah, like that's what it means. And then the next generation would be like, well, but that's always been there. Like we've never known the time that isn't there. And like maybe people just took those letters and they used it to create words, and they said those shapes and used them to create words. And so people actually just like, they made up a God from something that was there.
Yeah.
And took their language from shapes they saw in the sky and stuff like that. And actually like very quickly, the story then asks God that God shows up in some other way. But that actually doesn't seem like how God is interested in working with humanity. And we have this weird assumption that like that there seems to be this weird idea located in different places that, and if he was there, that's how he'd work. Well, that's a strange assumption.
Yeah.
On the surface, like we make that assumption that, oh yeah, I know exactly how God would work if God were there.
Yeah. If God's goal was to be known as efficiently as possible, we think we can come up with a whole bunch of ways he could have done that far better than the ways he has.
But like think. If we believe what he says to Moses, if he did that, we'd all instantly die.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it would be beyond us. And so this is where there's some like, and I love, again, it's a Frederick Buechner quote, which you start to see why I love him so much. Like he starts to talk about this idea that humans, it's actually his definition of theology. And he says, theology is human thoughts about God. And he says, this is a species trying to understand the workings and thinkings of a being so far beyond them. The only comparison I can conjure up is it's as if dung beetles decided to write a treatise on the life of human beings. If we found out that they were doing it, we'd probably think it was quite funny. We can only hope that God thinks the same about us.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, this is just not like in their capacity to understand how we think, feel, and act.
Yeah.
Everything they do is out of instinct. Like there's no cognitive process. There's nothing going on beyond instinct.
Yeah.
Like, and so like for dung beetles to write a life on human beings, it's beyond them.
Yeah.
So like we're trying to do the same.
Yeah.
And so when we say things like, well, God would do this if he were real, man, like that again, that's a strange assumption that you know that. Because I don't even know what my wife and kids are thinking most of the time. And like to imagine that I have some sense of how God would think and feel is a very strange thing.
Yeah, for sure.
It's stranger to me. And again, this is speaking as me as a pastor who has their own questions, doubts constantly. You know. It's stranger to think to me that I have exactly in my mind or worked out how the universe just popped up as it is. Even with all the theories around that, without some divine spark. Than it is to think I can understand God, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So for those of you who were at Alpha last night and were at my table, I shared this already, but for the rest of the tables who might be listening, I sort of sheepishly shared, I should be a pastor with like crazy faith. And here's why. I grew up in a country where the supernatural happened way more regularly. My parents were missionaries and experienced like obvious supernatural demon possession and the casting out of those demons. My dad was in multiple occasions was protected supernaturally from being murdered by stoning by a crowd of angry college students who were incapable of hitting him with stones from 20 feet away. Just story after story after story of supernatural things. And then I also shared last night in Alpha several of the seasons in my life where I like threw in the towel. I'm done with this faith thing. I don't know if I can buy it. One of those times while I was on staff at this church, sheepishly. But I just had doubts because of these same kinds of things. And if supernatural science can't explain experiences were enough, then I have plenty compared to the average American. And yet I still run into these doubts. So I don't think the goal is 100% certainty.
No, I would agree.
Nor, if we're intellectually honest, could we get to 100% certainty. But I'm not, the older I get, I'm not 100% certain about almost anything anymore. Not like I have enough confidence to drive a car, to sit in this chair. My rational capacities, I just doubt a lot more than ever. I can't explain art. I can't explain music and why it moves me. I can't explain love. I can't explain so many things, but I have similar evidence that all those things exist and move me, that there's gotta be something bigger and more powerful than science can quantify. And I think the most intellectually honest scientists agree with me. Because talk to a quantum physicist. They don't understand it.
Talk to a neurologist.
They don't get it. There's like, so many unknowns.
So there's suddenly this like shift where you had, I felt like in a brief period in the early 2000s, some sense of like, oh, we figured this stuff out. We know how the universe
I remember
works.
that,
You know, and it was very brief.
We're about to crack the code.
And then suddenly quantum, neuroscience, like how these different things work, how neurology connects across incredible barriers, distances, how like the brain works in ways we just don't quite understand. And how, quantum, like the classic definition of quantum, you know.
The God particle. Once we figure this out, we're going to prove that he didn't exist. And then they're like, shoot, the Higgs boson. And you're just oh my goodness,
but I was actually talking about who was it that said like, the best way to tell me you don't understand quantum theory is to tell me you understand quantum theory. Like, it's just like, you know, this is like the father of the art of the science.
I listened to probably the best lecturer that speaks English on the topic. And in an interview, he's like, I don't know. There's so many things.
Suddenly there's like,
he's like, the math, I'll tell you this, the math is beautiful. It doesn't make any sense.
So suddenly there's like this sense of like, oh, we have more questions than answers. Which is exactly what happened when suddenly people broke the firmament of the sky and started to look out into space. You know, like the famous quote by Yuri Gagarin, the Russian astronaut, was, I don't see God anywhere. And you're like, well, what did you expect? Like, I mean, it just, again, it's like there's a naivety to some of the questions that assume certainty.
Okay, so with our last 4 minutes, we just talked about science like in a passing way and faith in a passing way in various different ways. What's the relationship between science and faith then? Like, what is science good at and what is faith good at?
So I think science is good at asking lots of questions except for the why question. Like, I think that's where it tends to struggle, right? Like, it's not its function. It tends to seem to like look at when and how at best it can.
Yeah. It's a there it is.
Yeah. But
that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yep.
But as soon as it gets to why is it there, that's not really its field. And I think good scientists tend to acknowledge that. That, like we're not capable of doing that. So the best we can say is that it was there because it was there, or there because something happened.
Yeah.
But the why behind it becomes a real limitation. And so I think the best theologians that I've met do not feel like they're at war with science.
Yes.
And the best scientists I've met do not think they're at war with theology.
Yes.
They're like, we're trying to approach the thing that we see from different perspectives.
They're two different fields. Yeah. One is like, and I think a lot of Christians, and rightfully so, like Christianity has struggled in the scientific space for a lot of reasons, partially because we have tried to say Christianity's doing science.
Yeah.
And I would tend to disagree with that. But yeah, it's not trying to do science. It's trying to ask the why, meaning questions. And it oftentimes is vetted out by science in various different ways, in really exciting ways. But its primary agenda isn't to explain what a thing is. It's explain why a thing is.
Yeah.
And vice versa. Science can try as hard as it can to define the molecular structure of being moved by a piece of beautiful music. Sure. And it can see, we see the brain in this section of the brain is firing. But why does that result in tears welling up in my eyes when I hear a vocalist hit that note?
And why did it not work for another person?
Yeah.
Like, why did the person next to you not feel anything the same that you felt?
Yeah.
So it always pushes into these different questions. Anyway. If we've got time, I just want to drop a note that I think is helpful on the question around, like, that you mentioned of like, am I good enough? Are we good?
Yeah.
Type thing. And I think this is something that I really value from my own life. I think that when we ask those questions, like, let's phrase it specifically like, am I good with you?
Yeah.
They're very much first person questions.
Okay.
They start with me. And I think the message of Jesus is that it doesn't start with me, it starts with him. You know, there's actually a really great one of my favorite clips from a sermon is from a guy who I disagree with on a ton of things. It's a guy called Alistair Begg.
Yes.
And one of the things he talks about is like the gospel's always third person. It always starts with God. If it starts with me, I've gone wrong at the beginning. So like, if I think like I'm going to stand before God one day and say like, and he's going to say, well, why are you, acceptable?
Why do you think you should be here?
And I start with because that's actually not how the gospel's ever presented. It's actually because you. And so the story actually, like he tells, is he imagines this guy who's brand new to faith, the thief on the cross going and standing, at the gates of heaven, and the angel who's letting him in says, on what basis are you here? Tell us about the doctrine of like justification. He's like, I don't really know anything. And he's like, okay, well, how about like the doctrine of like scripture? He's like, not a clue what you're talking about. He's like, well, why are you here? And he says, because the man on the middle cross said I could come.
The ultimate trump card.
Yeah. And that question of like, are we good? Am I good with you is actually like, because you said I am, because you invited me and you welcome me.
Yeah.
So that
good.
has to be the ground level thing. Now the question then becomes like, am I living life as you intended it to be lived? Or am I like continuing on this journey, however you might phrase that? Am I
Am I reaping the harvest of all the
Sure.
There's potential.
But if that question tries to recreate the foundation in Paul's language and doesn't start with, but you invited me, you said I could come, you welcomed me in, like that's my foundation. Now, what else do you have for me? Is there something else you have for me? Is a better question, I think, than am I good with you? Because if you've chosen to accept Jesus' invitation, that is the only basis, right?
Yeah.
For being good.
Yeah.
So I think that, like, I always think when I ask questions that way, I tend to have to catch myself and say, okay, this probably isn't the basis.
And so we can settle your mind at ease. The Christian tradition teaches that we can give you a more sure answer to the question: Are you doing this right?
Yeah.
And are you good with God? And the answer to that question that the tradition offers is it doesn't actually matter what you're doing or whatever. What matters is whether you have said, yes, I would like to receive the grace that you have to offer.
You know, in terms of, like, sometimes we think of ourselves as making a journey towards God. And the only way to see that is he's come almost all the way. Yeah. Do you remember Hitch, the movie?
Yeah.
Where the kiss scene is like, you know, like he says, I say you go 90 and she comes 10. You never go the 400%.
Yeah.
Well, in this, like, to take that analogy, like, God has come 99% of the way. And that may even cover it. Like, our response is minuscule compared to the distance he has come to find us.
Yeah.
You know, we're simply saying yes to the God who has come almost all the way.
And then all the rest of the teachings of Scripture are an invitation to life.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, on that note,
on that bombshell,
we're going to call it a day. We did not get a chance to address the question, are there many ways to God? There's plenty of opportunities to address that question later in this alpha-focused series that we'll do on the show. And so I put it down for next week, if that's a question you have. If you disagree with everything we just said, send us a note on redcouchtheology.com. Send us harder questions, easier questions, whatever you would like. If you want to, we'd love to hear from you. And I'm going to try and find the stop button as I do every single week. Goodbye.